You open your banking app before you even get out of bed. You scroll past the balance without really looking at it, because you already know what it says. Not broke, not rich, just stuck. You've had a job for years. You've gotten raises. And somehow the number never really moves. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It was never about how much you earn. It's about a set of principles most people never learn. And one man spent 50 years teaching them before almost anyone else did. His name was Jim Rohn. He never ran a hedge fund. He never founded a tech company. He started as a farm boy in Idaho, went broke in his 20s, and then became the mentor who taught Tony Robbins everything he knows about success. Rohn didn't get rich by discovering some secret formula. He got rich by following 7 principles over and over for the rest of his life. And once you understand them, you'll realize your bank account isn't broken. Your habits are just running an old, outdated program. Let's start with the first one, because it's the one that changes everything else. Rohn used to say, take care of your money, or the lack of it will always take care of you. Most people think that's a motivational line. It's actually a warning about what happens when you don't manage money on purpose. In 1955, an economist named Cyril Northcote Parkinson wrote something that later became known as Parkinson's Law. His original observation was about time and bureaucracy, but the money version of it is brutally accurate. Expenses rise to meet income. Give someone a raise, and within a few months, their spending has already absorbed it. They don't feel richer. They just feel normal again, at a higher cost. If you've ever wondered why a bigger paycheck never seems to translate into bigger savings, that's why. Your money isn't disappearing. It's being managed by default, instead of on purpose. The second principle is where Rohn's advice gets specific. He told people to save at least 10% of everything they earn, no matter how small the income. Not invest it yet. Not spend it wisely. Just remove it from circulation before you ever see it. This sounds almost too simple to matter. But there's a reason it works, and it comes down to psychology, not math. In the 1970s and 80s, the psychologist Daniel Kahneman, working alongside Amos Tversky, developed what's now called prospect theory. One of its core findings is that people feel the pain of losing money roughly twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gaining the same amount. That's why cutting spending after the fact feels miserable. You're experiencing it as a loss. But automatically saving 10% before you ever touch the money never triggers that pain, because you never had it to lose in the first place. Rohn understood this decades before it had a name. Now picture 2 people earning the exact same salary. One of them saves nothing, because they're waiting until they earn more to start. The other one, from their very first paycheck, sets aside 10% automatically. 5 years pass. The first person has a slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car, and $0 saved. The second person has a modest life, and a financial cushion most people their age don't have. Same income, completely different trajectory. That gap didn't come from luck. It came from a decision made on day one. The third principle is about where the real wealth is actually built, and it's the one that surprises people most. Rohn said formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. He wasn't dismissing school. He was pointing at a gap. Most people stop learning about money the day they leave the classroom. They learn a skill, they get a job, and they stop investing in themselves. Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent years researching actual American millionaires for their book, The Millionaire Next Door. What they found broke almost every stereotype. Most self-made millionaires weren't doctors or celebrities. They were ordinary business owners, often with average degrees, who kept reading, kept studying their industry, and kept improving long after school ended. The income didn't come first. The self-education did. Which brings us to the fourth principle, and this is the one that reframes everything you think about spending. Rohn used to say, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. Most people want their financial problems to shrink. Rohn wanted people to grow past them. There's a difference between hoping the bills get smaller and building the skills that make the bills irrelevant. This is the counterintuitive twist most people miss. Cutting your coffee budget will never make you wealthy. becoming more valuable in the marketplace will. The fifth principle explains why some people can earn a fortune and still end up with nothing, and the evidence here is almost hard to believe. Research compiled by the National Endowment for Financial Education found that a striking percentage of lottery winners and sudden windfall recipients end up broke within a few years of receiving the money. Some studies put the number as high as 70%. Think about that. These are people who didn't earn their way into wealth slowly. They got a check for millions of dollars overnight, and most of them lost it. Rohn's explanation was simple. Wealth that outpaces your habits doesn't stay wealth for long. If your money management skills aren't built for the amount of money you have, the money finds its way back down to match your habits. This is why he insisted that discipline had to come before the dollars, not after. The sixth principle is about who you spend your time with, and it's probably the one people resist the most, because it feels personal. Rohn's you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, not just in mood, in income, in ambition, in financial habits. If the people closest to you treat debt casually, eating out constantly, and putting off saving until later, that becomes your baseline for normal, whether you notice it or not. And if the people around you talk about investing, building skills, and long-term thinking, that becomes your baseline too. Rohn wasn't telling people to abandon their friends. He was telling them to notice the invisible pressure of their environment, because it's shaping their financial decisions more than they realize. The seventh and final principle is the one Rohn considered the foundation for all the others. He said, discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. Every one of the first 6 principles requires a small, boring, repeatable action. Saving 10% before you spend it. Reading instead of scrolling for 30 minutes a night. Choosing your circle deliberately. None of these actions feel dramatic in the moment they're happening. That's exactly why most people skip them. They're waiting for a moment that feels significant enough to justify the effort. But wealth was never built in dramatic moments. It was built in the ounces, repeated for years, while other people waited for something easier to come along. There's a reason this principle sits at the foundation instead of somewhere in the middle. Every plan eventually meets a day when motivation runs out. The alarm goes off and saving 10% feels pointless, because the account still looks small. The book on the nightstand feels less appealing than another hour of television. On that day, the 6 principles before this one don't execute themselves. Discipline is the only thing that carries them across the gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Rohn watched thousands of people learn exactly what he taught, nod along, and then quietly go back to their old habits within a week, simply because nobody had convinced them that the ounces mattered more than the tons. So let's walk through what this actually looks like. Put together, you get paid. Before anything else touches that money, 10% moves into savings automatically, the way Rohn described. You spend part of your free time each week learning something that makes you more valuable, the way Stanley's research showed self-made millionaires actually did. You notice who you're spending time with and whether their habits are pulling your standards up or down. And you keep doing the small, unglamorous version of all of this, because you understand that regret costs far more than discipline ever will. None of these 7 principles require you to earn more money first. That's the twist Rohn kept coming back to for 50 years. People assume wealth is a result of income. It's actually a result of habits applied consistently, regardless of income. The farm boy from Idaho who went broke in his 20s didn't become wealthy because a better opportunity finally showed up. He became wealthy because he changed the way he handled the opportunities he already had. So open that banking app again. Look at the number, the real one this time. It isn't a verdict on who you are. It's a reflection of habits you can still change, starting with the very next dollar that comes in. Rohn spent his whole life proving that the gap between broke and wealthy was never about the paycheck. It was about which of these 7 principles you were willing to actually practice, starting today.